Subscribe now. New Royal Guard stories exposing shocking moments inside the royal family. The night shift at Kensington Palace had always been quiet. Almost too quiet for James Mitchell's liking. He had been working as a royal guard for nearly 12 years, and in all that time, he thought he had seen everything there was to see behind the gilded walls of Britain's most famous residences. But nothing could have prepared him for what he would witness on that cold February evening in 2024. James was stationed in the security control room, a small, cramped space filled with dozens of monitors displaying live feeds from cameras positioned throughout the palace grounds. His partner for the night, a younger guard named Thomas, stepped out for his break, leaving James alone with the flickering screens and the soft hum of the equipment. It was approaching 2 in the morning, and most of the royal family members were supposedly asleep in their private quarters. The security footage showed empty corridors, darkened gardens, and the occasional patrol guard making his rounds. James sipped his lukewarm coffee and rubbed his tired eyes, fighting off the drowsiness that came with the late hour. He had been doing this job long enough to know that nothing ever happened during these night shifts. The most excitement he usually got was watching a fox dart across the lawn or a staff member sneaking back from a cigarette break. But then, something on one of the monitors caught his attention. A figure was moving through the East Wing corridor, where the family's private bedrooms were located. James leaned forward, squinting at the screen. The hallway was dimly lit by the soft glow of wall sconces, casting long shadows that made it difficult to identify who was walking there at such an unusual hour. He quickly checked the access logs on his computer. According to the system, everyone should have been in their rooms. No alerts had been triggered. No doors had been opened outside of their program schedules. Yet there she was, clear as day on camera 7, moving purposefully down the hallway in what appeared to be a long, dark robe. James adjusted the camera angle and zoomed in slightly. His heart skipped a beat when he recognized the figure. It was Camilla, the queen consort herself, walking alone through the corridor in the middle of the night. This was highly unusual. Members of the royal family rarely wandered the palace alone at night, and when they did, they typically informed security beforehand. He watched as Camilla paused outside a door, glancing left and right as if checking to see if anyone was watching. The gesture struck James as oddly furtive, almost suspicious. In his years of service, he had never seen any member of the royal family display such cautious behavior within their own home. They usually moved with confidence and ease, comfortable in their private spaces. What happened next made James sit up straight in his chair, his coffee forgotten. Camilla reached into her robe pocket and pulled out what appeared to be a keycard. She swiped it against the electronic lock, and the door clicked open. James knew immediately which room it was. Camera 7 covered the section of the East Wing where Catherine, the Princess of Wales, had her private bedroom suite. His mind raced with questions. Why would Camilla be entering Catherine's bedroom in the middle of the night? Why was she using a keycard instead of knocking? And most importantly, why did she look around so nervously before going inside? James quickly started the recording protocol, making sure every second of what he was witnessing was being saved to the secure server. His training kicked in automatically. Any unusual activity involving senior royals needed to be documented regardless of what it was or how innocent it might seem. He had learned early in his career that palace security was not just about protecting the royals from outside threats, but also about maintaining a detailed record of everything that happened within these walls. The door closed behind Camilla, and James switched his view to the internal corridor camera that covered the entrance area of Catherine's suite. There were no cameras inside the private bedrooms themselves that was strictly forbidden to protect the royals' privacy, but the entrance foyer was monitored. He could see a sliver of light coming from beneath the bedroom door, suggesting that someone inside was awake. Minutes passed like hours. James kept his eyes glued to the screen, wondering what could possibly be happening behind that closed door. He checked his watch. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. 15. This was not a quick visit to deliver a message or check on someone's well-being. This was something else entirely. His mind wandered to the rumors he had heard circulating among the staff over the past few months. There had been whispers of tension between Camilla and Catherine, but James had always dismissed them as typical palace gossip. The staff loved to speculate about relationships and rivalries among the royals, often making mountains out of molehills. But now, watching this strange nighttime visit unfold on his screen, he wondered if there might have been some truth to those whispers after all. James thought back to the various interactions he had observed between the two women during public events and private family gatherings. On the surface, everything always seemed cordial and proper. They smiled for the cameras, stood together at ceremonies, and appeared to maintain the expected level of familial respect. But he remembered certain moments, fleeting glances, and subtle body language that suggested the relationship might not be as warm as it appeared to the public. There was that charity event last autumn where Catherine had arrived late, and James had noticed Camilla's tight smile and the way she had turned away just a bit too quickly. There was the Christmas gathering where the two women had barely spoken to each other, staying on opposite sides of the room throughout the entire evening. And there were the countless small moments that individually meant nothing but collectively painted a picture of two women who were perhaps not as close as a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law should be. 20 minutes had passed now. James made a note in the security log, carefully choosing his words. He knew that everything he wrote would be reviewed by his superiors and possibly by members of the royal household. He needed to be factual and objective, but he also needed to document what he was seeing. Just as he was finishing his entry, movement on the screen caught his attention again. The door to Catherine's suite was opening. Camilla emerged, and this time James could see her face more clearly. Even through the slightly grainy security footage, he could detect what looked like satisfaction in her expression. She was no longer glancing around nervously. Instead, she walked with purpose back down the corridor, her head held high, her steps confident. James switched between cameras, following her progress as she made her way back through the east wing. She returned to her own quarters, and within moments, the hallway was empty once again, as if nothing had happened. The palace returned to its usual nighttime stillness, but James knew that something significant had just occurred. He sat back in his chair, his mind spinning with the implications of what he had witnessed. Should he report this immediately to his supervisor? Should he wake someone up to inform them of this unusual incident? Or should he wait until morning and file it as part of his regular shift report? Before he could decide, Thomas returned from his break, carrying 2 fresh cups of coffee from the staff kitchen. He noticed immediately that something was different about James's demeanor. "Everything all right, mate?" Thomas asked, handing him one of the cups. "You look like you've seen a ghost." James hesitated. He trusted Thomas. They had worked together for over 3 years, but this was different. This involved senior members of the royal family, and James knew that loose lips could end careers in this job. On the other hand, Thomas would be reviewing the footage as part of the standard security protocol. We would see it eventually anyway. "Something strange just happened," James said quietly, gesturing to the monitor showing Catherine's corridor. "The Queen Consort just spent about 20 minutes in the Princess of Wales's bedroom." Thomas raised his eyebrows. "At this hour? It's odd. Was the princess expecting her?" "I don't think so," James replied. "Camilla used a key card to get in. She didn't knock. And the way she was acting before she went in, it was like she didn't want anyone to see her." The 2 guards exchanged meaningful looks. They both knew that what James had witnessed could be completely innocent. There could be a dozen reasonable explanations for a late-night visit between family members. Perhaps there was a family emergency that James wasn't aware of. Perhaps they had planned to meet at that time for privacy reasons. Perhaps Catherine had asked Camilla to come at that hour. But the way it had happened, the secretive manner, the use of a key card, the nervous glances, all of it suggested something else. It suggested that this was not a planned visit, and that whatever had transpired in that bedroom was something Camilla had wanted to keep private. James made his decision. He would file a complete report with the footage attached and let his superiors decide how to handle it. It was not his job to interpret or judge what he had seen. His job was simply to observe, document, and report. Whatever this midnight visit meant, whatever had been discussed or done in that bedroom, it was now part of the official security record. What James did not know, what he could not have known at that moment, Was that his decision to carefully document and preserve that footage? It would set off a chain of events that would shake the very foundations of the modern royal family? The forbidden video he had just recorded would become one of the most sought-after pieces of evidence in a scandal that would captivate the world and expose secrets that the palace had worked desperately hard to keep hidden. The night shift continued as usual. James and Thomas completed their rounds, filed their reports, and went home when their replacements arrived at 6 in the morning. The sun rose over London, bringing with it another day of royal duties, public appearances, and carefully maintained images. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. A secret had been witnessed, recorded, and preserved. And secrets James had learned in his 12 years of service never stayed buried forever. In the days that followed, James went about his duties as normal, but he could not shake the memory of what he had seen on that screen. Every time he passed through the East Wing, every time he saw Camilla or Catherine during his shifts, he found himself wondering what had really happened that night. The footage was stored securely in the palace servers, accessible only to senior security personnel. James assumed it would be reviewed, noted, and then filed away like thousands of other routine security recordings. He had no idea that the video was already being watched by people far above his pay grade. People who understood immediately that what he had captured was potentially explosive. He had no idea that copies were being made, that urgent meetings were being held, and that powerful people were trying to decide how to contain what could become a devastating leak. Most importantly, James had no idea that within a few weeks, that forbidden video would find its way out of the palace's secure systems and into hands that would have no qualms about sharing it with the world. 3 weeks after that strange February night, the atmosphere inside Kensington Palace had grown noticeably tense. Catherine, Princess of Wales, had cancelled several public appearances, citing a need for rest and privacy. The official statements from the palace press office spoke of a demanding schedule and the importance of self-care. But the staff who worked closest to the royal family knew better. Something was wrong. Whatever it was had started around the time of that midnight visit. Sarah Bennet, Catherine's personal secretary for the past 6 years, had noticed the change immediately. The princess had always been composed and gracious, even under the intense pressure of royal life. But lately, Catherine seemed distracted, withdrawn. She spent more time alone in her private rooms, declining invitations to family dinners and finding reasons to avoid certain gatherings where Camilla would be present. Sarah had tried to broach the subject delicately one afternoon while going over Catherine's scud for the upcoming month. They were in Catherine's private sitting room, a beautifully decorated space filled with family photographs and personal touches that made it feel warm despite the palace's grandeur. "Your Royal Highness," Sarah had ventured carefully, "if there's anything troubling you, anything at all, I hope you know that I'm here to help in whatever way I can." Catherine had looked up from the calendar they were reviewing, and for just a moment, Sarah saw something in her eyes. Pain, perhaps, or anger, or maybe a mixture of both. But then the princess's practiced composure returned, and she smiled that same gracious smile she had perfected over years in the public eye. "I'm perfectly fine, Sarah," Catherine had replied, but her voice lacked its usual warmth. "Just tired, that's all." "The children have been particularly energetic lately." Sarah had nodded and let the matter drop, but she did not believe it for a second. She had seen Catherine handle far more stressful situations with ease. This was something different, something deeper. Meanwhile, in the palace security office, James Mitchell had begun to notice something disturbing. The footage from that night, the video of Camilla's visit to Catherine's bedroom, had disappeared from the main server. He had discovered this purely by accident while reviewing some other footage from the same week for an unrelated security matter. At first, he thought it might be a technical glitch. Files occasionally got corrupted or misplaced in the system. But when he checked the backup servers, those files were gone too. Every copy of that night's footage from Camera 7 and the related cameras had been wiped clean. In his 12 years of service, James had never seen security footage deliberately deleted. Everything was supposed to be preserved for a minimum of 90 days. He sat at his computer terminal, staring at the gaps in the timeline where the footage should have been. His stomach churned with unease. Someone with high-level access had gone into the system and systematically removed any evidence of that midnight visit. This was not a simple deletion. This was a cover dash-up. James debated what to do. He could report the missing footage to his supervisor, but what if his supervisor was already aware of it? What if the deletion had been ordered from above? He could be walking into a situation that would cost him his job or worse. On the other hand, he had sworn an oath to maintain the security and integrity of the royal household. Allowing evidence to be destroyed violated that oath. What James did not know was that he had made a crucial decision on that February night that would prove to be either the smartest or most dangerous choice of his career. Years of working in security had taught him to trust his instincts, and his instincts that night had told him that what he was witnessing was important. So before filing his official report, before anyone else had seen the footage, James had done something he had never done before. He had made a personal copy of the video on a secure thumb drive that he kept locked in his flat. It was against protocol. It could have gotten him fired if anyone found out. But something about the furtive way Camilla had moved through that corridor, something about the entire strange situation, had made James want to protect that evidence. Now, seeing that the official footage had been scrubbed from the palace servers, he was glad he had trusted his instincts. The thumb drive sat in a locked drawer in his bedroom, and suddenly James realized he was sitting on something potentially explosive. He was probably the only person outside of the palace's highest circles who had proof of what had happened that night. The question was, what should he do with it? At the same time, rumors were beginning to circulate through the palace staff. Nothing concrete, just whispers and speculation. People had noticed the tension between Catherine and Camilla. They had noticed Catherine's withdrawal from family events. They had noticed the way conversations would stop when certain people entered a room. Margaret Walsh, one of the senior housekeeping staff who had worked at the palace for over 20 years, was particularly attuned to these undercurrents. She had cleaned these rooms, changed these sheets, and picked up after these royals for 2 decades. She knew when something was off. One morning, while cleaning Catherine's bedroom suite, Margaret noticed something that made her pause. There was a large envelope on the princess's desk, partially hidden under some other papers. It would not have caught her attention except for the official seal on it, the kind used for important palace documents. Margaret was not in the habit of reading private correspondence, but the envelope was open. She could see the first few lines of the letter inside. The words she glimpsed made her blood run cold. "Your concerns regarding the incident," it began, and though Margaret quickly looked away, not wanting to invade the princess's privacy further, she had seen enough to know that something serious was being discussed. Margaret finished her cleaning quickly and left the room, but her mind was racing. What incident was the letter referring to? Why did Catherine look so troubled lately? And why did Margaret get the feeling that whatever was happening within these palace walls was far more serious than the usual family disagreements? Back in the security office, James had made a decision. He needed to talk to someone he could trust, someone who understood the gravity of the situation. He reached out to his old mentor, Robert Davies, who had retired from palace security 2 years earlier after nearly 30 years of service. If anyone would know what to do, it would be Robert. They met at a quiet pub far from the palace, a place where they were unlikely to run into anyone from work. James ordered them both drinks, and then, in hushed tones, told Robert everything. He described the midnight visit the way Camilla had behaved, the subsequent deletion of the footage, and the fact that he had made a personal copy. Robert listened in silence, his weathered face growing more serious with each detail. When James finished, the older man sat back and let out a long breath. "You've stumbled into something big, lad," Robert said quietly. "Something that people in very high places clearly want to keep quiet." "What do you think happened that night?" James asked. What could Camilla have been doing in Catherine's room that would warrant erasing all the evidence? Robert shook his head slowly. "I don't know, and honestly I'm not sure you want to find out. But I'll tell you this from my years of experience. When people at that level start destroying evidence, it usually means one of 2 things. Either something illegal happened, or something so damaging to their reputation happened that they'd do anything to keep it quiet." "So what should I do?" James asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I can't just pretend I didn't see what I saw. You need to be very careful, Robert warned. That thumb drive you made, it's both your insurance policy and your biggest liability. If the wrong people find out you have it, they'll do whatever it takes to get it back and make sure you never talk about what you saw. Are you saying I should destroy it? James asked, though the thought made him uncomfortable. It felt wrong to eliminate evidence, even if keeping it put him at risk. I'm saying you need to think very carefully about your next move, Robert replied. If you go public with this, your life will never be the same. You'll lose your job, you'll probably face legal action, and the palace machine will do everything in its power to discredit you. But if you do nothing, if you just keep quiet and pretend none of this happened, you'll have to live with knowing you were part of a cover-up. James stared into his drink, feeling the weight of the impossible choice before him. He thought about his years of loyal service, his oath to protect the royal family, his responsibility to uphold the truth. These values were suddenly at war with each other. There's a third option, Robert said after a moment. You could find a journalist you trust, someone with the credibility and resources to investigate this properly. Give them the footage, tell them what you know, but do it in a way that protects your identity for as long as possible. That's still going public, James pointed out. They'd figure out eventually that I was the one who leaked it. Maybe, Robert conceded. But at least this way you're not carrying the burden alone. You're putting it in the hands of professionals who know how to handle sensitive information and protect their sources. Over the next few days, James wrestled with his decision. He continued going to work, watching the monitors, filing his reports, and acting as if everything was normal. But inside he was torn apart by the knowledge he carried and the choice he had to make. Meanwhile, the situation at the palace continued to deteriorate. Catherine had now canceled a major overseas trip, something that was almost unprecedented for a senior royal. The official explanation cited health concerns. But the vagueness of the statement only fueled more speculation in the press and among the public. The media had begun picking up on the strange atmosphere surrounding the royal family. Tabloid headlines speculated about rifts and tensions, though they had no concrete information about what was really happening. Royal commentators appeared on television, discussing body language at public events and analyzing the significance of who stood where during official photographs. What none of them knew, what none of them could have guessed, was that the real story was far more dramatic than any of their speculations. The real story involved late-night intrusions, deleted evidence, and a secret that powerful people were desperate to keep hidden. Sarah, Catherine's secretary, found herself in an increasingly difficult position. She was receiving calls from the palace press office, from family members, from various officials, all asking questions she could not answer because the princess had confided nothing to her. Sarah had always prided herself on being discreet and loyal. But how could she protect Catherine when she did not understand what Catherine needed protection from? One afternoon, Sarah was summoned to a meeting with senior members of the royal household. They questioned her extensively about Catherine's state of mind, her recent activities, her conversations. Sarah answered carefully, revealing nothing of substance because there was nothing of substance she knew, but the intensity of their questioning made it clear that they were worried about something specific, not just the princess's general well-being. "Has the princess mentioned anything unusual to you?" one of the officials asked, leaning forward across the polished conference table. "Any concerns about her safety or privacy?" Sarah had shaken her head, genuinely confused. "No, nothing like that. She simply said she needs some rest." The officials exchanged glances that Sarah could not interpret. They thanked her for her time and dismissed her, but she left the meeting feeling more unsettled than ever. What were they so worried about? What did they think Catherine might reveal? Unknown to all of them, James had made his decision. He had found a journalist, a respected investigative reporter named Rebecca Thompson, who had built her career on exposing corruption and holding powerful institutions accountable. She had covered royal stories before, but always with a commitment to accuracy and fairness that James respected. He had reached out through an encrypted email service, identifying himself only as a palace security guard with information about a serious incident. Rebecca had agreed to meet him, understanding the sensitivity of the situation. They met in a crowded coffee shop in a neighborhood far from both the palace and Rebecca's newspaper office. James had the thumb drive in his pocket, and his heart was pounding so hard he was sure everyone around them could hear it. Rebecca listened as James told her everything, showing her the video on a laptop he had brought specifically for this purpose. Her eyes widened as she watched Camilla's late-night visit unfold on the screen. James could see the journalist in her immediately understanding the significance of what she was seeing. "Do you have any idea what they were discussing?" Rebecca asked, her voice low and urgent. "No," James admitted. "There are no cameras inside the private bedrooms. But whatever it was important enough that someone went to great lengths to erase all evidence that this visit even happened." Rebecca sat back, her mind clearly racing through the implications. "This is enormous," she said quietly. "This could be the biggest royal story in decades. But I need to verify everything, investigate thoroughly before we publish anything." "I understand," James said, and then he pushed the thumb drive across the table. "This is the only copy left, as far as I know. Once I give this to you, there's no taking it back." Rebecca picked up the small device, holding it carefully as if it were made of glass. "I'll protect your identity for as long as I possibly can," she promised. "But you need to understand that eventually they'll figure out who leaked this. When that happens, you need to be prepared." James nodded, feeling both terrified and relieved. The burden he had been carrying was now shared, and whatever happened next, at least he would not have to face it alone. He had chosen truth over comfort, exposure over silence. Whether that made him a hero or a traitor remained to be seen. Rebecca Thompson worked quickly, but carefully over the following 2 weeks. She was not the kind of journalist who rushed to publish without verifying every detail. This story was far too important to get wrong. She began by researching everything she could find about the relationship between Camilla and Catherine. Looking for any public hints of tension or discord, what she found was fascinating. On the surface, the two women maintained a cordial relationship for the cameras. They attended events together, stood side by side during ceremonies, and said all the right things in interviews. But when Rebecca analyzed their body language in photographs and videos, when she studied the subtle cues that most people missed, she began to see patterns. There was distance between them, both physical and emotional. At family gatherings, they rarely spoke directly to each other. When they did interact, their smiles never quite reached their eyes. And in recent months, that distance had grown more obvious, even to casual observers. Rebecca reached out to her network of palace sources, people who worked in various capacities within the royal household. Most were reluctant to talk, bound by loyalty and non-disclosure agreements. But a few, speaking on condition of absolute anonymity, confirmed that tensions had been high between the Queen Consort and the Princess of Wales for months. One source, a staff member who had worked at the palace for over a decade, provided particularly illuminating information during a carefully arranged phone call. Rebecca had assured complete confidentiality, and the staff member spoke in hushed, nervous tones. "There's been friction for a long time," the source explained. "It started small, disagreements about how certain things should be done. Different visions for the family's public image. But it escalated. Catherine felt that Camilla was undermining her, making decisions that should have been Catherine's to make, especially regarding the children's upbringing and public exposure. Can you give me specific examples?" Rebecca asked, taking careful notes. The source hesitated before continuing. "There was an incident last year where Camilla gave an interview discussing future plans for the monarchy, speaking as if she had authority over decisions that really belonged to William and Catherine as the direct heirs. Catherine was furious, but she handled it privately, through proper channels. Nothing was ever resolved to her satisfaction. And recently, Rebecca pressed gently. Has something specific happened to make things worse?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "I don't know the details," the source finally said. "But about a month ago, something changed. Catherine became very withdrawn. She started avoiding family events where Camilla would be present. And there are rumors, just whispers really, that Catherine discovered something. Something about Camilla that she was not supposed to know." Rebecca's pulse quickened. This aligned with the timeline of James's video. Any idea what she might have discovered? "No one knows for sure," the source replied. "Or if they do know, they're not talking." But I can tell you this. Senior members of the household have been in emergency meetings. There's been talk of damage control, of managing a potential crisis. Whatever happened, it has people at the highest levels very worried. Armed with this background information, Rebecca began the delicate process of trying to confirm what exactly had transpired during that midnight visit. She studied the video James had given her repeatedly, analyzing every frame, every gesture, every detail she could extract from the grainy security footage. She noticed how Camilla had checked the hallway before entering, how she had used a key card rather than knocking, how long she had remained inside the room. These details suggested premeditation and secrecy. This was not a spontaneous visit or a casual check-in. Camilla had planned this, had obtained access to Catherine's room, and had gone there with a specific purpose in mind. But what purpose? That was the question Rebecca could not answer definitively. And she knew that without understanding the why behind the visit, publishing the footage would be irresponsible. It would show something unusual and secretive, but it would not tell the complete story. She decided she needed to approach this from another angle. She reached out to a former member of the royal household, who had left service a few years earlier and was now willing to speak more freely about Palace's life. They met in a private room at a discreet club where Rebecca was confident they would not be overheard. The former staff member, whom Rebecca agreed to call Alex to protect their identity, had worked closely with several members of the royal family and had insights that proved invaluable. "You have to understand how things work in that world," Alex explained, sipping tea in the elegant surroundings. "Everything is about control, about managing narratives and protecting reputations. The family's image is everything, and people will go to extraordinary lengths to protect it. Even illegal lengths," Rebecca asked carefully. Alex gave her a knowing look. The line between what's legal and what's simply covered up can be very thin in those circles. "I've seen documents destroyed. I've seen witnesses convinced to change their stories. I've seen entire incidents simply erased from official records as if they never happened, like security footage being deleted," Rebecca ventured. Alex's eyes widened slightly. "Has something like that happened recently?" Rebecca decided to take a calculated risk. She trusted Alex's discretion, and she needed confirmation of how unusual such a deletion would be. Yes. Footage of an incident involving senior royals was systematically removed from palace servers. All copies, all backups. Then whatever that footage showed must have been extremely damaging, Alex said seriously. That kind of comprehensive deletion requires authorization from the very top. It's not something that happens lightly or often. Rebecca leaned forward. "In your experience, what kind of situation would warrant that level of cover-up?" Alex considered the question carefully. It would have to be something that could fundamentally damage the monarchy's reputation or stability. A serious crime, perhaps. Or evidence of behavior so scandalous that it would undermine public trust in the institution itself. Or, Alex paused, choosing words carefully. Evidence of serious wrongdoing by someone who cannot be publicly held accountable without causing a constitutional crisis. The implications of Alex's words hung heavy in the air. Rebecca felt the weight of the story she was pursuing, pressing down on her. This was not just palace gossip or celebrity scandal. This was potentially something that could shake the very foundations of the British monarchy. While Rebecca continued her investigation, the situation at Kensington Palace reached a breaking point. Catherine had been summoned to a meeting with the king, Camilla, William, and several senior advisors. She knew what the meeting would be about. They were going to ask her to sign a non-disclosure agreement, to formally agree never to speak about what had happened that night in February. Catherine sat in the ornate meeting room, surrounded by portraits of her husband's ancestors, feeling trapped and angry. William sat beside her, his face a mask of conflicted emotions. He loved his father, respected his stepmother, but he also loved his wife and could see the toll this situation was taking on her. The king spoke first, his voice heavy with the authority of his position. "Catherine, we understand that you've been distressed by recent events. We want to assure you that the matter has been addressed internally, and we believe it's in everyone's best interest, including yours and your children's, to move past this unfortunate incident." Unfortunate incident? Catherine's voice was cold and controlled, but there was steel beneath the polish. "Is that what we're calling it now?" Camilla spoke up, her tone attempting to be conciliatory. "Catherine, dear, you must understand that what happened was a misunderstanding. I had your best interests at heart." "My best interests?" Catherine repeated, and for a moment her composure cracked. "You entered my private bedroom in the middle of the night without permission. You went through my personal papers and belongings. You violated my privacy in the most fundamental way possible, and then you and your staff tried to erase all evidence that had ever happened." The room fell silent. One of the advisors cleared his throat uncomfortably. The king's face remained impassive, but William had gone pale beside Catherine. "We are prepared to offer certain assurances," one of the advisors interjected, pushing a thick document across the table toward Catherine. "This agreement outlines compensation for your distress and guarantees that such an incident will never occur again. In exchange, we would ask for your discretion regarding the details of what transpired." Catherine looked at the document but did not touch it. "You want me to sign away my right to speak the truth about what happened to me in my own home?" "We want to protect the institution," the king said firmly. "The monarchy is bigger than any one person, Catherine. Even you. Even me. What serves the greater good sometimes requires personal sacrifice." Catherine stood up, her decision made. "I will not sign that document. What happened was wrong, and asking me to pretend it never occurred is wrong. I've spent years supporting this family, upholding its values, defending its reputation. But I will not be complicit in covering up something that violated my fundamental rights as a human being, royal or not." She walked out of the meeting, leaving shocked silence in her wake. William quickly followed her, catching up as she strode through the corridor. "Catherine, wait," he said, gently touching her arm. "We need to talk about this." She turned to face him, tears finally beginning to break through her composure. "Did you know, William? Did you know what she did?" "I found out after," William admitted, his own distress evident. "I confronted her. I confronted my father. They said it was complicated, that there were reasons. But they wouldn't give me details, and then they asked me to help convince you to let it go. And will you?" Catherine asked, searching his face. "Will you help them convince me to stay silent?" William pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "No," he whispered. "I won't. What happened to you was wrong. I don't care who did it or why. You're my wife, and I should have protected you better. I'm so sorry, Catherine." They stood together in that hallway, two people trying to navigate impossible circumstances, caught between family loyalty and personal integrity. Neither of them knew that their conversation was being observed from a distance, by a staff member who would later report every word back to the senior advisors. Back at her desk, Rebecca had finally assembled enough pieces of the puzzle to begin drafting her article. She still did not know exactly what Camilla had been looking for in Catherine's bedroom that night, but she had confirmed several crucial facts. She had verified that Camilla had made an unauthorized nighttime visit to Catherine's private quarters. She had confirmed that security footage of the incident had been systematically deleted. She had documented the subsequent tension between the two women and the palace's efforts to pressure Catherine into signing a non-disclosure agreement. Most importantly, she had multiple sources confirming that whatever had happened was serious enough to trigger emergency meetings at the highest levels of the royal household in attempts at a comprehensive cover-up. Rebecca drafted and redrafted her article, trying to find the right balance between revealing the truth and being responsible about the implications. She knew that once this story broke, it would dominate headlines around the world. The monarchy would face its most serious crisis in decades. Reputations would be destroyed. The carefully managed image of royal unity would shatter. She also knew that James, her source, would almost certainly be identified and would pay a heavy price for his decision to leak the footage. She felt the weight of that responsibility, knowing that her choice to publish would affect not just the royals but everyone connected to the story. Before finalizing the article, Rebecca made one last attempt to get comment from the palace. She sent a detailed list of questions to the press office, giving them 48 hours to respond. She outlined what she knew, what she had verified, and what she intended to publish. The response came back within 6 hours, much faster than usual. It was brief and threatening in its formality. The palace denied all allegations, claimed the story was based on false information and malicious intent, and warned that publication would result in legal action. But notably, they did not deny that the incident had occurred. They did not deny that footage had been deleted. They simply insisted that Rebecca's interpretation of events was wrong and that she would be making a grave mistake by publishing. Rebecca read the statement 3 times, analyzing every word. The palace's response actually confirmed several of her key points. If the story were completely false, they would have said so explicitly. Instead, they were threatening legal action and questioning interpretation, which suggested the basic facts were accurate, but the palace wanted to control the narrative about what those facts meant. She made her final decision. The story would run in the next morning's edition. She had done her due diligence, verified her sources, and given the palace an opportunity to respond. The public had a right to know what their taxes were supporting and what was happening behind the carefully maintained facade of royal propriety. That evening, Rebecca sent the article to her editor with a note explaining the sensitive nature of the story and recommending additional legal review before publication. Within an hour, she received a call summoning her to an emergency editorial meeting. When she arrived at the newspaper's offices, she found not just her editor, but the publisher and the legal team waiting for her. They had all read the article, watched the video footage, and reviewed the evidence she had compiled. "This is extraordinary," the publisher said, though Rebecca could not tell if it was praise or concern. "If we publish this, we need to be absolutely certain of every fact. The palace will throw everything they have at us to discredit the story and punish us for running it." "I am certain," Rebecca replied firmly. "I've verified everything through multiple sources. The video is authentic. The cover-up is real. This happened, and the public deserves to know." The legal team raised concerns about potential libel issues, about privacy laws, about the sensitive nature of publishing security footage from a royal residence. They debated for hours about how to present the story in a way that was truthful but defensible in court. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, they reached consensus. The story would run, but with careful legal language and clear attribution of all claims. The video would be published on the newspaper's website, allowing readers to see the evidence for themselves. Rebecca left the meeting exhausted but satisfied. In a few hours, the forbidden video would be seen by millions of people. The secret that powerful individuals had worked so hard to bury would be exposed to the harsh light of public scrutiny. Whatever happened next, at least the truth would finally be told. The morning the story broke, London woke to chaos. Rebecca's article appeared on the front page of the newspaper with the headline, "The Midnight Visit, Security Footage Reveals Secret Palace Intrusion and Cover-Up." Within minutes of the print edition hitting the streets, the video was trending worldwide on social media. The forbidden footage that James had captured, the palace had tried so desperately to erase, was now being watched by millions of people across the globe. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. News networks around the world interrupted their regular programming to cover the story. Royal commentators who had spent years carefully managing the monarchy's image were suddenly faced with irrefutable evidence of something deeply troubling. The video showed exactly what Rebecca had described: Camilla moving furtively through the palace corridors in the middle of the night, using a key card to enter Catherine's private bedroom, remaining inside for over 20 minutes, and then leaving with a satisfied expression. Public opinion erupted like a volcano. Social media platforms were flooded with reactions ranging from outrage to shock to demands for accountability. The hashtag Royal Cover-Up began trending within the first hour. People who had always supported the monarchy felt betrayed by the revelation that they had been lied to, and that evidence had been destroyed to hide the truth. At Kensington Palace, the morning began with emergency meetings and crisis management. The king's advisors scrambled to formulate a response. But they were dealing with a situation that had already spiraled out of their control. The video was everywhere, being analyzed frame by amateur detectives and professional journalists alike. There was no containing it, no spinning it, no making it disappear. James Mitchell watched the news coverage from his small flat, feeling a mixture of vindication and terror. He had expected to be identified quickly, but he had not anticipated just how fast it would happen. By noon, his name was being reported by several outlets. Someone within the palace, either through technical analysis of who had access to that footage or through simple process of elimination, had figured out that he was the leak. His phone would not stop ringing. Journalists from around the world were trying to reach him, offering money for exclusive interviews. His neighbors were gathering outside his building, some curious, some angry that he had brought such attention to their quiet street. James had prepared for this moment as best he could, but the reality of it was more intense than anything he had imagined. Robert, his former mentor, called him within minutes of the news breaking. "You need to leave your flat right now," Robert said urgently. "Go somewhere safe, somewhere no one would think to look for you. The palace is not going to take this lying down, and neither are the tabloids. You need protection." James followed the advice, packing a quick bag and slipping out the back entrance of his building. He made his way to a friend's cottage in the countryside, a place where he could hide while the storm raged around him. Meanwhile, at the palace, Catherine watched the news coverage with mixed emotions. Part of her was relieved that the truth was finally public. She was no longer being pressured to sign away her right to speak. But another part of her was devastated by the spectacle of it all. By the way, her private pain had become entertainment for the masses. William stood beside her. His jaw clenched as he watched his stepmother being condemned on television. Whatever Camilla had done, she was still his father's wife, still part of his family. The situation had put him in an impossible position, torn between supporting his wife and maintaining some semblance of family unity. "I need to make a statement," Catherine said quietly. "People are speculating about what happened, coming up with all sorts of theories. I need to tell my side of the story. Advisors will want to review anything you say," William warned. "They'll try to control the message." "I don't care what the advisors want anymore," Catherine replied, her voice firm, despite the emotional strain. "This is my story to tell." Against the strong objections of the palace communications team, Catherine arranged for a televised interview with a respected journalist. The palace could not stop her. She was the Princess of Wales, and if she wanted to speak publicly, that was her right. The interview was scheduled for that evening, giving the entire world just a few hours to wonder what she would reveal while preparations for the interview were underway. The palace finally issued its official statement. It was a masterclass in careful wording and damage control, but it could not change the fundamental. The reality that millions of people had seen the video with their own eyes. The statement acknowledged that an incident had occurred and that internal security protocols had been followed. It claimed that the deletion of footage was standard procedure in matters involving family privacy and that there had been no wrongdoing by any member of the royal household. Statement expressed regret for any distress caused but stopped short of admitting fault or apologizing directly to Catherine. The public response to this statement was swift and brutal. People saw it for what it was, an attempt to minimize and excuse behavior that most viewed as unacceptable. The idea that entering someone's bedroom without permission in the middle of the night was merely a family privacy matter struck many as insulting to their intelligence. By early afternoon, protests had begun forming outside Buckingham Palace. Hundreds of people gathered, holding signs demanding transparency and accountability. Some called for Camilla's removal from all royal duties. Others questioned whether the monarchy itself could survive such a profound breach of trust. Inside the palace, Camilla herself was in seclusion, refusing to speak to anyone except the king and her closest advisors. According to staff members who observed her that day, she appeared shocked by the intensity of the public backlash. She had apparently believed that her position and the palace's influence would protect her, that the story would be contained or explained away. The reality of her actions being broadcast worldwide, being condemned by millions, seemed to have hit her hard. The king faced his own crisis. He loved his wife, but he also understood the gravity of what she had done and the damage it was causing to the institution. He had spent his entire life preparing to lead. He was being advised by different factions pulling him in different directions. Some urged him to defend Camilla publicly, to stand by his wife no matter the cost. Others suggested that he needed to distance himself from her actions to protect the monarchy. As evening approached, the nation tuned in to watch Catherine's interview. The viewing figures were astronomical, rivaling those of major sporting events or royal weddings. People were hungry for answers, for Catherine's perspective on what had happened and why it mattered. Catherine looked composed, tired as she sat across from the interviewer in a carefully chosen setting that looked intimate but professional. She had chosen to wear a simple dress, no jewelry except her wedding ring. Her hair pulled back in a way that made her look both vulnerable and strong. The interviewer began gently asking Catherine how she was doing and thanking her for agreeing to speak publicly. Then came the inevitable question. "Your Royal Highness, can you tell us in your own words what happened on the night of February 14th? Catherine took a breath and began to speak. "I had gone to bed around 11 that night. My children were asleep, William was away on a brief engagement, and I was alone in my private quarters. Around 2 in the morning, I was awakened by the sound of someone in my room." She paused, the memory clearly still painful. "I sat up and turned on the light to find the Queen Consort standing near my desk. She had used a key card to enter without knocking or announcing herself. I was shocked, frightened initially, and then confused about why she would be there at that hour." "What did she say to you?" the interviewer asked gently. "She told me she had come to discuss certain matters that she felt needed to be addressed privately," Catherine continued. "She went to my desk, where I keep personal correspondence and documents, and she began looking through my papers. When I objected, when I asked her to leave, she became defensive. She said that as the Queen Consort, she had a right to ensure that nothing damaging to the family's reputation was being kept or planned." The studio audience gasped audibly at this revelation. Catherine's eyes glistened with tears, but her voice remained steady. "She specifically looked through correspondence between myself and various charities and organizations I support," Catherine explained. "She questioned why I was planning certain initiatives without consulting her first. She made it clear that she believed she had authority over my royal duties and that she was displeased with some of the directions I wanted to take my work." "How long did this intrusion last?" the interviewer asked. "Nearly half an hour," Catherine replied. "I kept asking her to leave, but she insisted she had every right to be there. She went through drawer after drawer, reading private letters, personal notes. It was a complete violation of my privacy and my dignity. When she finally left, she warned me that if I complained to anyone about her visit, it would be seen as me causing unnecessary drama within the family." The interview continued for another 30 minutes, with Catherine describing the aftermath. She explained how she had immediately reported the incident to William and to palace security, how she had discovered that the security footage had been deleted, and how she had been pressured to sign a non-disclosure agreement to keep the matter quiet. "Why did you refuse to sign?" the interviewer asked. Catherine's answer was simple but powerful. "Because what happened to me was wrong, and asking me to pretend it never occurred was also wrong. I have spent my entire adult life supporting this family and this institution, but I will not be complicit in covering up behavior that would be unacceptable in any workplace, in any family, in any context. I deserve the same basic respect and privacy that any person deserves, regardless of my title or position." When asked what she hoped would come from speaking out, Catherine's response was measured. "I hope that this will lead to meaningful changes in how the royal household operates. There needs to be accountability, even for those in the highest positions. There need to be protections for everyone who lives and works within these institutions. And there needs to be honesty with the public about who we really are, not just the carefully managed image we present." The interview concluded with Catherine looking directly into the camera. "To anyone who has ever felt powerless in the face of wrongdoing by someone more powerful than themselves, I want you to know that I understand. I know how difficult it is to speak up, how much pressure there is to stay silent, how tempting it is to just accept what happened and move on. But our silence protects those who harm us and enables them to harm others. Sometimes, speaking the truth is the hardest and bravest thing we can do." The reaction to Catherine's interview was immediate and overwhelming. Public support for her surged dramatically. People who had been uncertain about whose side to take in the royal drama now firmly backed the princess. Her vulnerability, her honesty, and her courage in speaking out despite the enormous pressure to stay silent resonated with millions of viewers. Conversely, support for Camilla collapsed. Polls taken immediately after the interview showed that over 70% of British citizens believed she should resign from all royal duties. Protests outside the palace grew larger and more vocal. Calls for investigation and accountability echoed from Parliament to ordinary living rooms across the nation. The royal family was in full crisis mode. Emergency meetings continued late into the night as advisors tried to salvage what they could of the monarchy's reputation. The king finally issued a personal statement expressing his deep regret for the pain caused to the Princess of Wales and announcing that appropriate measures were being taken to address the matter. Internally, the public wanted more than vague promises of internal measures. They wanted consequences. They wanted transparency. They wanted to know that even those at the highest levels of society could be held accountable for their actions. James Mitchell, watching all of this unfold from his countryside refuge, felt a complex mixture of emotions. He had set all of this in motion by making that copy of the security footage, by choosing to leak it to Rebecca Thompson. His life as he knew it was over. He would never work in royal security again, possibly never work in security at all. Some people were calling him a hero. Others were calling him a traitor. He had lost his career, his privacy, and his anonymity, all for the sake of truth. But he had also given Catherine a voice. He had provided evidence that supported her account and prevented the palace from dismissing her complaints as exaggeration or misunderstanding. In his small way, he had helped shift the balance of power, if only slightly, away from those who believed their positions entitled them to violate others with impunity. In the days and weeks that followed, the forbidden video continued to dominate headlines. Investigations were launched into who had authorized the deletion of the security footage and whether any laws had been broken. Several senior palace officials resigned or were quietly dismissed. Reform proposals were introduced in Parliament to increase oversight of royal household operations and to establish independent mechanisms for addressing complaints. Camilla was forced to step back from public duties indefinitely. While she remained technically queen consort, her reputation was irreparably damaged. The image she had spent years cultivating as a devoted royal family member had been shattered by its actions, and the subsequent cover-up. Catherine, despite the personal cost of going public, found herself more popular than ever. Her approval ratings soared. The charities and causes she supported saw increases in donations and volunteers. She had become a symbol of speaking truth to power, of refusing to be silenced by those who believed themselves above accountability. The monarchy itself survived, though scarred and changed. The forbidden video had exposed fundamental problems in how the institution operated, how it treated those within its walls, and how it dealt with internal conflicts. Reform would be slow and difficult, but it had become unavoidable. James eventually emerged from hiding to give his own interview, explaining his decision to leak the footage and expressing no regrets despite the personal consequences. "I took an oath to protect the royal family," he said. "But protecting them does not mean covering up wrongdoing. Sometimes protection means holding people accountable, even when it is uncomfortable or difficult." Rebecca Thompson won multiple journalism awards for her reporting on the story. She had broken one of the biggest royal scandals in modern history, while maintaining the highest standards of ethical journalism. The forbidden video that she had chosen to publish, despite intense pressure and threats, had changed the national conversation about power, privacy, and accountability. As months passed and the immediate crisis faded, the lessons of the forbidden video remained. It had shown that in an age of technology and information, even the most powerful institutions could not bury the truth indefinitely. It had demonstrated that ordinary people, from security guards to journalists, could make a difference by choosing courage over comfort. And it had proven that sometimes the most damaging secrets are the ones that should never have been secrets at all. It's the ones that expose behavior that should never have been tolerated in the first place. The royal family would continue, adapting to a new reality where absolute privacy and unquestioned deference were no longer guaranteed. Catherine would remain the Princess of Wales, stronger and more respected than before, for her refusal to be silenced. And somewhere, stored on secure servers and archived websites, the forbidden video would remain as a permanent record of one night when someone crossed a line, and of the long chain of events that followed when truth finally emerged from shadow into light.